Ford Freeway outbound at 159th Street. IDOT just cleaned up some glass that was on the roadway there. You do have road work on the northbound Tri-State from the Mile-Long Bridge 75th. That's in the left lane. And the northbound Veterans Memorial has a left lane closure from North Avenue to Army Trail. Reagan Tollway westbound, the right lane's blocked 59 to the Aurora Toll Plaza. There's some congestion around Roseland Hospital this morning, where the COVID-19 screening starts at 10 o'clock. 111th is blocked between State and Perry. That's traffic. I'm Jim Telemonte on AM 560 The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next in our 1 hour heating and air conditioning weather center. Very windy, clouds and sun this morning, and with the showers of rain, maybe a snowflake or two in the afternoon, high 48. 38 degrees officially at O'Hare with sunshine. Your next news update is at 9. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560 The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by The Mortgage Update with Dan Frio. Every Saturday morning at 7 on AM 560, The Answer.
If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Breaking up is hard to do, but maybe it's getting easier. F.H. Buckley, New York Post columnist, author of the book American Secession, The Looming Threat of a National Breakup. He writes that coronavirus and, in part, the national response, as well as the varied state responses, could hasten a real secession movement. Now, those movements are somewhat afoot, including in Illinois. We know, we've talked to State Representative Brad Holbrook from Southern Illinois about this. There's resolutions and there's an effort to gather support to break up the state of Illinois.
Why not?
You have other separatist movements, if you will, in places like West Virginia, California. There's been any number of proposals about carving that state up. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by the aforesaid Professor Buckley. He's a professor of law at Scalia Law School, George Mason University. And again, the book, American Secession, The Looming Threat of a National Breakup. Professor Buckley, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Dan and Amy, thank you for having me.
So how has the COVID response enhanced the thesis of your book?
Well, it's done nothing to lessen the threat. And bear in mind, I called it a threat. I wasn't arguing for secession. I just said, hey, look, guys, this might happen. Watch out for it. And so what I wanted to do was contrast what's happening right now with what happened after 9/11. I mean, we all came together after 9/11, and for obvious reasons, that's what's happening now. We have to practice social distancing, but maybe there's a kind of emotional distancing going on as well. We're all concentrated on our local areas, where the threat might be. And President Trump, I think, wisely said, look, states have a role in this as well. But in a way, that's kind of turned one state against another. Almost amusingly, Rhode Island state troopers are knocking on doors to find out if there are any recent New York arrivals, right, who haven't quarantined themselves.
Well, but the flip side of that is you have governors like Inslee and Brown sending ventilators where they're most needed, and you have sort of that resource sharing, and not to mention medical professionals that are getting cleared to practice across state lines, going to Massachusetts per Governor Baker's request, and so you have that mobility happening too, and that sharing of resources and information happening.
Yeah, that's a good thing. I mean, that's what we want to see. We'd like to see our country realize, look, this is really serious. I mean, there's been a lot of nonsense going on in our politics, a lot of things that are fundamentally silly that divide people, and let's concentrate on the real issues where we're all in it together. But I might have hoped that maybe we'd be less divided in terms of politics than we had been in the past, but that doesn't stop either. I mean, at least major newspapers in D.C. and New York, you pick them up and it's all Trump made this happen and he's evil and all of that stuff. So, I don't think that's what Americans want to hear right now, but it's what the media is telling us.
But I don't feel like a solidarity with our neighbors. I just feel like we're living in a culture of snitches and mask shaming and cough shaming and distance shaming.
Yeah, I know. I got to tell you, I've had this kind of cold going on since November, and I'm sniffling. I feel like a leper when I go outside. People look at me.
Right, run away, get away from me. Right, or they call the sheriff on you. You're lucky that hasn't happened, actually.
Right.
Well, yeah. but now here's the other thing about the whole idea that we could break apart here, is the still the mobility that Americans have, at least pre-COVID they have, ostensibly post-COVID we will have, and you're going to see that reflected in the upcoming census with places like Texas and Florida gaining multiple congressional seats, and places like New York and Illinois and California losing seats.
Yep, absolutely, and that's interesting. I mean, that works both ways. On the one hand, that may cure some of our divisions by getting people to settle in places where people think more like them. On the other hand, it makes secession look like less of a threat. I mean, when people think secession right now, what they're thinking about is a horrible example of the Civil War. We don't want to go there, but I think the fact is that today, in the case of secession movements, you don't see war so much. What you see is people sorting themselves out, and so that trend would just continue. You'd have people. If California somehow decided to secede, that would just accelerate the movement of people to and from California.
Mm.
I mean, it'd be great for U-Haul,
yeah. Well,
what's great for U-Haul is Illinois. And speaking of Illinois, I mean, we have 102 counties here, and 60 plus, I think, have reported cases of coronavirus. And those relatives down in Southern Illinois are scratching their heads like, we don't have one case here. Why aren't our kids at school? So if we did have two separate Illinois, I think that Southern Illinois, I don't know what they would call themselves. They would not have a stay in place order or stay in shelter order, I don't think.
Yeah. The state of downstate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And then, if that's what it's like when basically there's one law for all of Illinois, now you think about what it's like if you have one law for all of the United States made by people in Washington on the Supreme Court or whatever. It doesn't work, right? I mean, we're really quite different. And so, the proper answer to this sort of thing would be a greater emphasis on federalism. That's where I ended up in the book. I said, look, if we have these problems, really what we want to do is allow people in different states to go their own way rather than imposing from on top one rule for 330 million people. It's not going to work.
Well, right. I mean, so in a way, this is sort of a re-education of the American public. There's sort of civics 101 about our federalist system. And I mean, I don't know, it's been said 2,000 times in these briefings: federal support, state management, local implementation. And so, you can, if you're one of these champagne socialists in Illinois, you can hate on Trump all you want, and you can embrace JB. I don't think you can get your arms around him, but you can theoretically embrace him, and Lori Lightfoot and what they're doing and their jawboning at Trump and so on and so forth. So there you go. There's your answer. Fine. You want to live or die with your state and local politicians? You're happy to do so. Let's reduce the size and scope of the federal government, empower state and localities, and then have at it. 50 laboratories of democracy.
And that's the problem in Illinois, isn't it? I mean, Cook County and downstate. I mean, they're two different countries, really, in many ways. I'm not to put down either, but they're different.
Very well. It's actually more like three states in one, actually. But let me. I want to get your take. You're a law professor and everything. I wanted to get your take on this because I got into a friendly row with Steve Moore about this yesterday, and the issue is whether or not these shutdowns, whether the guidelines at the federal level or the actual orders at the state level, if they don't constitute a unconstitutional taking, at least an unconstitutional taking if there's not compensation provided. And so what the federal government is doing and what some state governments are doing with their disaster relief is essentially compensation for a taking.
Well, I think the state governments have the power to shut down, their state, the business of their state, under the police power of a state. But that's only while there's a real threat. Now, you've already referred to the fact that downstate there isn't so much of a problem in Illinois. And, at some point that's going to lift. I mean, the real question is going to be at this point, How will the different states react in terms of lifting these bans? I don't think the feds can do it. There's no Fed police power like that. It's totally a state matter. Okay, so Trump can't shut things down, but the government's, the governors have been doing it, and that's an example of federalism at work. I mean, I think you want to know the truth. I think that there was kind of a panic city rush to shut everything down where it wasn't entirely necessary. I mean, some governors took the heat for not doing it. People said, look at what's happening in New York. They're shutting it down. Why aren't you doing it here in Florida? And so there was a copycat movement. But I think federalism will also work the other way when we see the threat dissipate a little bit and people will start opening up their states for business. So
yeah,
there's going to be that kind of competition as well. And people at that point will say, look, they're going to work in Florida. The threat is abating. Why are we shut down here?
Yeah, I think that's right. Also, it's a reminder for those governors who are calling for a national shutdown order that you have a governor who doesn't know anything about the Constitution because there's no national shutdown order to issue, J.B. Pritzker and so many of these other Dems.
We'll be the last ones to open up. I'm sure we will.
Be sure to check out his book. The book is American Secession, The Looming Threat of a National Breakup. He is F.H. Buckley, law professor at the Scalia Law School at George Mason, New York Post columnist. F.H. Buckley, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Take care.
Yeah, it was an honor, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download the AM560 mobile app today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
G'day, I'm Scott from Plug-in Pest Free. If you have a rodent or pest problem at your home or business, don't spray harmful toxic chemicals. Use Plug-in Pest Free, the electromagnetic pest control device that uses your wiring to get rid of pests fast.